and I want to welcome you all to this free webinar on overcoming the fear factor. I am your host, Mark DeJesus, and it is an absolute delight to be with you all today. I'm excited to share this message with you, and I'm going to be giving you an invitation into taking a journey to no longer be taken out by the fears that are hindering you. I know this subject literally affects everyone. There's not a person I know who does not have to, at some point in their life, at many times in their life, weekly, daily, probably hourly, minute by minute, that we have to face our fears, that we have to deal with fear. The language of it surrounds us and permeates the culture. In fact, those of you tuning into this, you recognize somewhere in our life we can find, and not just in little places, but everywhere, fear is in the narrative of our culture. It's in our news, it's in our media. It surrounds our family conversations. If you gather together and get together with friends and loved ones, you'll find fear is somewhere in the language infecting us. It's also affecting us on an interior level in a deep way, where our thoughts, our ponderings, the storyline that we're listening to, how we're making our decisions. And there's many of you tuning into this, you face it at a very tormenting level. You're facing anxiety. Maybe you're at the point you've been diagnosed with anxiety disorders. Maybe you're at the point where you're having panic attacks, or you've fallen into depression because the anxiety has just taken you out so much. You might have obsessive tendencies. I've worked with many people that have obsessive compulsive disorders. They have various forms of fear-based issues that have held them and taken them captive. The research is showing that a quarter of Americans have some kind of diagnosed mental illness that they're struggling with, and the numbers are increasing at astronomical proportions. And those are just the people that have come forward and are receiving and getting help. That's not to mention the millions of people struggling in an inner isolation that have not found their breakthrough. But I also want to address those of you that you are literally a few steps of facing fear away from some major breakthroughs in your life. Fear is holding you back. It's the one thing you need to face to go to an entirely new level of victory in your life. It is simply, I work with hundreds and hundreds of people, and many times they are just a step of facing fear away from major victory in their life. And so I'm here today to be an encouragement and equip you to take the next step, to be equipped with the tools that you need. Because many times we struggle because we just haven't been equipped. We just haven't been given the tools. So welcome. Thanks for tuning in. My name is Mark DeJesus. I want to welcome you to this webinar and this training course. I want to give you a little bit of my background. I have been in the business of helping people for over 20 years. I have spent the majority of my life helping people to deal with the issues of their heart and life to get free. I worked in the capacity in ministry as a pastor. I did youth ministry for about 10 or 11 years. Also included in that, I did associate pastor work. I did work not only with youth, but with young adults. I also did a lot of work in worship and music and arts. In addition to that, I've spent the majority of my lifetime in pastoral work, but also did it in a lead pastor role. So I've been in a staff role. I've also been a senior pastor, lead pastor role. And I've also done traveling, speaking, and so forth. I'm now a full-time author, a full-time teacher in training people to live healed, whole, and free lives. I specialize in helping people break off limitations so that they can live fruitful and healthy lives. That's my goal, and that's what I do. So I love getting to the root of why people do the things that they do. What holds them back, and what keeps them from living the life that they were meant to live. And one of the root issues that keeps millions of people held back is this issue of fear. And so I'm not only well equipped to help you, I also have a story of my life being filled with fear. In the year 2000, up until the year 2004, I was at an epic level of struggling with anxiety, struggling with worry, struggling with all kinds of levels of debilitating fears in my life. This was an incredibly challenging issue for me, to the point where I had anxiety every moment of every day. And on a scale of 1 to 10, I was somewhere between 8 and 10 every day. When I woke up in the morning, it was there. My mind was very obsessive. I had a hard time maintaining my peace. I had a hard time being able to position myself to rest, to be able to enjoy things, to be able to have fun, to be able to focus. I am very familiar with panic attacks because I would have them quite often. And then it led me to a place of depression, to the point that I was so discouraged and so riddled with hopelessness that the idea of ending my life seemed reasonable. And it wasn't until God began to bring some people into my life. You see, when you are in a place where you're hungry, God can begin to put the right people into your path. Some of them you got to go search and find. But oftentimes, God will meet your hunger to intersect with the people, the resources that you need to go to the next level to get freedom in your life. And that's what I found in my life and journey, was God began to put people, teachers into my life. Now, they didn't just find me, I had to find them, but I had to be hungry. There's 3 things I want to give you before I even get into this talk, before I can give you this free teaching, this free resource in your life, is I had to first be hungry. No one can want your freedom, your healing, your transformation more than you do. No one on this planet. The moment somebody else wants it more than you, you're going to have a problem, because then you're going to depend on them to be the source in your life rather than letting God be the true source that you need for everything in your life and journey. Number 2 is I had to be humble. And that's tough, because most of the time we like to justify our fears, our hurts, our wounds. We like to cover them over. We like to justify, I don't have fear. That's what people will say. I don't have fear. I'm just stressed. I don't have fear. I'm just concerned. I don't have fear. I'm burnt out. You see, we have ways of covering over our issues when usually it takes us hitting rock bottom to go, all right, I surrender, God. What is it going to take? What do I got to do to start walking in the freedom that you have for me, and start really humbling myself so that I can receive from God, but also I can receive from other people. I can usually tell in about 2 minutes if somebody's in a posture of receiving, because it's all about how we're posturing ourselves relationally. Do we really want to receive, or do we want to just stay in our junk? Do we want to just be self-reliant, or do we want to position ourselves for true transformation? So we've got to be hungry, we've got to be humble, and we got to be teachable. Teachability is important. Why? Because I position myself that I don't know everything, and there's stuff that I don't know. There's stuff that I don't know in my life that I need to know, and I need to find it, apply it, put it into action, activate it so I can get free. I got to be hungry, humble, teachable. When I have those things in my life, I am set up for the greatest amount of transformation. And I was in that place, and God began to methodically teach me. You see, in the years 2000 and 2004, I was in a shaking for a massive renovation in my life. And I began to recognize, God, you're going to lead me into a place to deliver me from all of my fears. So I want you to know, because back in the day, I went and saw a church counselor, then I went to a therapist, a Christian therapist, then went to a psychiatrist, and then went on medication, had 2 forms of drugs that I was on to just help me get through the day. And I want you to know to this day, I am not any longer on any psychiatric medication. I want you to know today that I enjoyed this day, I had peace in my heart. I have rest. I'm no longer in daily torment. I'm no longer in daily anxiety. Sure, you have your tough days. Sure, you have your anxious moments. Sure, you have your things you got to work through. But I am no longer bound by the overall hum and buzz of anxiety in my life. And I'm very grateful. But it was a process that I had to deal with and face, because not only was my mind brought into a place of wholeness, my body started to heal from a lot of chronic illness. Because not only was I struggling in my mind, I was sick in my body all the time. And I'm so excited to tell you that as I dealt with my fears, my body actually started to heal itself in many areas, because your mind, your body are connected and intertwined very deeply. And fear not only compromises your peace, it compromises your body's ability to heal itself and to live in vitality and the fullness it was designed to live. And some of you today, you've got to get to that point where you say, enough is enough. It's time for me to take my life back. And so that's what I'm praying will take place here in this webinar. So as we jump into this, I want to give you some tools and give you some things that will help you in your overcoming and will lead you into a process where you can begin to let God set you free. As the Bible says, I sought the Lord and he delivered me from all of my fears. That God is faithful to help you and lead you into paths of freedom, of being free. I mean, that's a good deal in our life and in our journey. So I want to point you to the passage of scripture found in Luke chapter 21, verse 26, where Jesus called it. He said in the last days, this is what's going to happen. There's going to be a day and time where men's hearts are going to fail them because of fear. There is going to be an inability for people to process their spiritual hearts, and even their physical hearts are going to fail because of the anxiety, the stress, the worry, the junk that is going to face them in their life. Why? Simply because of the effects of fear in their life and the effects on the workings of what fear is seeking to do in their life. So I want to tell you right now, the goal of this message, the goal of this webinar is not just to give you a comfortable, cozy life. The goal of this webinar is to empower you to stand strong in the midst of crisis, in the midst of chaos. The only way you can prepare yourself for that, though, is to face the fears that you struggle with now and live a lifestyle that does not serve fear. It will prepare you to be armed up and ready to be a soldier that when other people are panicking and collapsing, you're standing up strong and tall in the power of his might. When you've done all to stand, you're standing. And when in darkness covers the areas of life that you live in, the glory and light of God will shine strong in you because you've learned to face your fears and overcome them. But Jesus said, we're going to have troubling times. We're going to have troubling days. But you don't have to be troubled and be the people that fall apart where it says men's hearts failing them. You don't have to have that be the narrative of your life. You can have the narrative of your life be one of freedom. Now, I know that in 2001, the United States was hit hard at 9/11. September 11th, 2001, we got hit with a terrorist attack, and our nation was shaken to the core with fear. And we panicked and reacted, and we went to war, and then America seemed as though it was trying to recover itself from the crisis event. But what happened is, in a lot of ways, we went back to our old lives. We didn't necessarily deal with our issues. And then a real deep undercurrent of fear rose to another level. So now anxiety for many people has just become a way of life. You're afraid of your finances. You're afraid of the future. You're afraid of what people think. You're afraid of tomorrow. And here's the thing, it's gotten to the point where fear is just a part of people's lives. One of the saddest things that I've seen in my life is how people have just accepted fear as a part of their life. They've accepted, I'm just going to be anxious. I'm just going to have this issue. I'm just going to have this struggle. And they have not recognized that there's so much more for them if they'll learn to just begin to face their fears, begin to overcome them, and begin to take them on. Because a lot of our language is very fear-based. A lot of our thoughts are fear-based. You have anywhere from 60 to 80,000 thoughts in the day. The majority of them, too often, are fear-based thoughts. If you were to put them on paper, lay them out, we either have thoughts that are faith-based, filled with hope, filled with the love of God, filled with what he can do, or we have fear-based thoughts, angry, toxic, I don't know what's going to happen, discouraging, depressing thoughts, all manipulated and worked by fear's effects. So you tell me what you think. When you look at some of the words I'm going to lay out to you, take a look at these words and you tell me if these are words or if these describe some of the feelings that you go through on a daily basis. Here's the big one that we often talk about. Worry. Oh, I worry. Some of you are professional worriers. You worry all the time. It's a part of your life. So much so that it becomes something that you make as your identity. I'm a very big worrier, you say, or say, I just worry a lot. I'm just real worried. And really what you're doing is you're under the effects of fear. The big one of the day is anxiety. How many of you are struggling with anxiety? You feel like, man, I'm just anxious a lot. I have a hard time sleeping. I have a hard time keeping peace. Maybe you're just so used to anxiety that your lifestyle jumps up to match it. So you got this buzz level of living. You've got this, because that's what anxiety does. It creates this buzz of nervousness. So you amp your life up to match the level of anxiety that you're actually battling with. It's a sad state to live in, but millions of people live that way, stressed, very filled with a lot of anxiousness and hyped up, driven, striving in their life. Such a lack of peace, which leads me to another word, which is stress, distress, pressure, lots of things going on. And this is the arena where disease will become a part of your life. And you can experience lots of illness, lots of chronic syndromes in your life, in your physical body, because of the work of stress. Without fear, there's no stress. If there's nothing to be afraid of, there's no longer stress necessarily. Another word that we use is the word panic. Panic is this sudden sense of, oh my goodness. And a lot of times we can have traumatic events in our life that create a panic programming in our life and in our journey. Timidity. This is more, the Bible uses this in one of the translations of the scriptures. It says God's not giving you a spirit of timidity, where we just, where timidity affects your life is maybe you're easily intimidated. That's a word that you need to understand because many of you are very deeply intimidated in life. You're afraid of people. You have a fear of man issue. You're afraid of what people think, what they're going to say. You have given people way too much power over your life. You're afraid maybe you're in business and you're easily intimidated, so you don't make sales calls, you don't take those steps because fear owns you. It pushes you back and holds you back because you have a fear of rejection. You have a fear of what people will say, what they'll think about your life. And so you're always trying to preserve yourself. And anytime you live that way, you will live in a stuck life. You might feel a sense of safety, but you won't feel a sense of fulfillment. Because you're always living in a box, trying to preserve and do everything you can to just survive. I'm not interested in surviving. And so this webinar is not to equip you so that you can live a comfortable, safe life. This webinar is designed to equip you to overcome and be the warrior that you are. You see, many of you haven't seen yourself as that. You're like Gideon. When God sends an angel to him, Gideon's like, who are you talking to? Because you're clearly not talking to me. Who's he talking to? You talking to me? You talking to me? Who's he talking to? What was he talking about here? And really, it's all about how you see yourself. And many of you have seen yourselves through the lens of being a fearful person. And that's not who God's called you to be. It's not his identity for your life. Another word that we use is the word dread. Dread is not necessarily in our language as it is in our feelings. We dread things. We dread the future. We dread what's going to happen. We dread tomorrow. Some people have night torments, and so they struggle with dread. That word terror is a work of what fear does. Terrorists. What do terrorists do? They come to intimidate you, to make you feel afraid, and really you need to stand up to it, but instead you back down. There's the word fright. Having a fright in your life, or maybe just scared. I'm scared. And sometimes it's important to admit you're scared. We don't like to admit it. Guys don't like to admit it because if we do, then that means we're chumps. That means that we're not that strong and powerful. Sometimes it's good just to admit it so then you can do something about it. There's the word concern. This is classic. This is classic fear language right here. Oh, I'm just really concerned. What does that mean? That means you're focused on a fearful outcome of a situation, and you're focused on the negative, and you won't step up to then step into what could happen. Let's face this thing, and let's deal with it so the situation can be healed or it can be remedied. We use the word overwhelmed, which is often a term that fear just works on us over and over and over again. So we get to the place where we feel overloaded, because that's what fear wants you to do. I want to give you a word that you may not be ready for when it comes to the subject of fear. And you don't realize that this is actually a fear-based word. It's the word control. You see, when you have fear in your life, one of the things you quickly try to do is you try to take control. You try to get control back into your life. And it's embedded in our DNA. We want to feel a sense of control and power. And a lot of that's legit. But there's a real dysfunctional, toxic pattern we can fall into in trying to control people, trying to control situations because of our fears. You need to really examine, how are you in your parenting? Are you controlling with your kids? No, I'm not. I'm just concerned. Are you controlling in your relationships? Are you a pastor watching this and you control your people and you think it's what's best for them, and really you're just getting in God's way? Are you a friend who tries to control your friends? You try to control situations? It's your fear operating. It's your fear keeping you from being healthy. And see, I'm not interested in teaching you how to just have a successful life or how to just get the numbers or get people to work in your favor. I'm going to lead you into a place where I want to encourage you to live a healthy life. And you can't live a healthy life controlling people. Many people live very passive postures because they're afraid, and that's how they deal with their fear, is they do nothing. I'm going to guarantee the majority of those of you listening to this, you have deep areas where you are really passive. And so therefore, there is a Jezebelic work trampling over areas of your life. If you don't know what that means, you need to go into the Bible, into the Old Testament, and you need to read about a woman named Jezebel. She was manipulative. She was controlling. She wound up and bound up the minds and hearts of people. And she works powerfully. That Jezebelic mindset works powerfully in situations where people are passive. And Ahab was a passive king, her husband. And so in situations where people are passive in any degree, whether it's husbands that are passive or fathers that are passive in their homes, there will be this Jezebelic work. In businesses, in churches, I've worked with a lot of pastors over the years. And one of the things that holds them back is that they're very passive with their people. They don't confront the things that need to be confronted. So therefore, this manipulative force begins to operate in their fellowships, and so they're always held back. They're capped. This manipulation is huge because out of fear, I seek to manipulate and orchestrate a situation to my advantage. And so now we're not operating in love. We're not operating in wholeness. We're operating in fear, trying to manipulate. There's also the word compulsive. We live in a very compulsive culture where we jump to do things quickly without any wisdom or much thought or pondering or counsel. We become very compulsive in our thoughts. I've worked with people that have OCD kind of issues, where you obsess, and you have a racing mind. You're constantly analyzing things. You're constantly analyzing. Why? Because there's a fear. And the fear is, I'm not safe. And so because I'm not safe, I need to hyper-analyze, hyper-examine, keep my mind racing, keep my mind going. Why? Because fear is operating behind the scenes. So we need to come to terms with what we're struggling with. A lot of it is fear-based. We're at unease because we're dwelling on the thought of something painful, evil, threatening happens. So we're geared up and we don't allow ourselves to live in the peace of God, that, you know what, He's got my back. He's covering me. I don't need to be afraid. I do not need to serve fear. So I want to go over some things real briefly. And the first thing I want to go over, and this is in your notes, in this webinar, those of you that are on your phones, this may be a little tricky to do, but you can always go back when you're at a desktop computer. Those of you at computers, you can click on the webinar outline. There's a link just under the screen. It'll give you the webinar outline, and you can open that up, you can print it off, and you can follow me in your notes. Because I want to talk to you about what fear does. On a basic level, just some things to get you thinking, to help you to understand where it's working, identify it. First, it creates a narrow focus in a negative way. This is not a positive thing. It's great to be focused, but it creates a narrow focus, and that you can write this word down in your notes. It's torment. That's the work it's wanting you to do. It's wanting you to narrow in and almost obsess and keep firing away at a certain subject until that thing is ingrained in you. You need to know that fear is a terrorist. It is a terrorist. It gains its power by getting you to listen. It acts as a bully for you to narrow in on one thing. Maybe it's the speech you got to give tomorrow. Maybe it's the person in your life. Maybe it's your finances. It's probably a whole list of things, but they're often very specific and they're very tormenting. So then you can't pay attention to anything else. Your brain can't keep life in view. You can't see a big picture perspective because you're narrowed in on these areas that you are unease about. So, second thing I want you to know is fear loves to pounce on sensitive hearts. Some of you, like me, you have a sensitive heart. You're sensitive to people. You're sensitive in relationships. You're also sensitive in your thoughts. And I want to help equip you so that that sensitivity can be used for God, where you're no longer just tormented by this, but it's actually used as a God-given tool so you can help set people free. So you can, because a lot of people with sensitive hearts, they can walk into a room and they can get the pulse of what people are feeling. They connect with people. But fear has taken a hold of that, so you can't use it effectively. So you're not at peace. So you do one of two things. You're just an openly hot mess all the time, or you shut that down. You shut that area down, you numb it, you medicate it, you use a drug, you check out, or you do some kind of activity to just numb you out, and you choose to not allow that area to be healed. Or maybe you just don't know because you don't have the tools and you haven't had somebody walk you through and help you so you can begin to understand that. All right? And that's been a story of my life, and I love helping people with that. Fear messes with your imagination. It toys with it. It toys with your imagination. It takes the God-given imagination, the thing that God has given you, to be able to think and project, to plan, to look ahead, to get excited about the possibilities. And instead, it takes your imagination and it creates an absolute hell, where one moment you're thinking about what to do tomorrow, and the next thing you know, you're scared of dying. You're scared of something happening to your kids. You're scared of yourself. You're scared of doing something that could harm someone. You're scared of your own thoughts. You're scared of the people around you. You're scared of what's going to happen. You watch the news and you're freaking out. It really will mess with you, and it will cause you to avoid what you need to face. And it will train you on this basic premise: to avoid pain and move to pleasure as quickly as possible. That's something you need to understand. Fear loves to train us to avoid pain, move to pleasure as quickly as you can. And see, there's things that you need to actually face that might be painful at first, but will help you to break through to the next level. Maybe it's the fear of rejection, or maybe it's the fear of, somebody being upset because you have to confront them on something. Fear will mess with, and it will hold you back. It will keep your imagination. And what it'll do, folks, listen to this. It will give you an altered world. It will give you a virtual reality experience that's not real reality. That's not real, and it's not where God's at, and it's not where other people are at. But it will make it so real that that's what you live by. Beware of a reality you create because of listening to fear. Number 4, fear. And this is. Whoa, wait, sorry, I messed up my slides. Where I'm at. Fear sabotages. That I just went into a whole different section. Fear sabotages the fight or flight system in our lives. You were all designed with a fight or flight mechanism. Okay? And so it's something that God created so that if a bear jumps out of the woods, you have certain fight or flight responses that kick in so you can run from the bear. So you can get out of that situation and you can now get into a place of safety. Well, here's the problem. We don't have bears chasing us, but what do we have now? Taxes, bills, finances, deadlines, people situations, strife, disagreements, deep inward traumatic fears, things we didn't receive as children that we needed. We weren't loved properly, so fear comes in. And now we're in a state and in a place where fight or flight is always engaging. And that's what fear wants to do, because if it can keep fight or flight moving, you will be in a chronic state under the effects of fear. You need to understand this because God wants to set you free. Now, fear trains us, I already mentioned this, but fear trains us in patterns of avoidance. It trains us in ways of thinking. It trains us in avoiding things. I mentioned moving away from pain and into pleasure. Now, number 6, fear will train you to have a very driven and busy lifestyle. Fear stirs up a busy lifestyle. We amp up our lives to match the buzz that anxiety creates. So what happens is, instead of being led by the Spirit of God, we become driven. And there's a difference. Being led by God, being led by the Spirit, when He's leading us, there's a rhythm. And that rhythm creates fruitfulness, wholeness. There's cycles in the day because we know when it's time to charge. We know when it's time to rest. We know when it's time to amp up a little bit. We know when it's time to just be at peace and just relax. And fear messes that all up. And it keeps you, instead of being in a led lifestyle, LED, being led by the hand of God, we're now driven, we're striving, we're performing, the pressure is on. Number 7, fear, it will steal your peace and it will steal your health. You see, without peace, we can't think and see clearly what we need to. And so what it does is it compromises our ability. And I want you to understand something very clearly, because I help people with this in understanding healing of disease. Because some of you need some healing in your physical body. And I may be here intersecting with your life and journey because there may be a fear issue or a litany of fear issues that's compromising your health. Cortisol levels are spiking, digestive systems, cardiovascular system, respiratory system, immune system, being compromised because of the work of fear. Some form of stress, anxiety, worry, some form of fear-based thinking that's lodged within you that God wants to displace, remove out, and set you free so you can get your health back. And I love leading people into that because God not only wants you healed, He wants you to be well. The Bible says in 3 John, I wish above all things that you prosper and be in health as your soul prospers. As your thinking grid is healthy, so is your body. And this has been important. And 10 years ago, my life was revolutionized as I understood the mind-body connection, and I understood spirit, soul, body connections. You are a triune being, spirit, soul, and body. They work together. You are one being, and those three dimensions to who you are work, and they're connected together. I'll get to that in just a second. So let's talk about fear in the overall understanding of the history of fear. The first thing you need to understand is that it showed up first in the garden. In Genesis 3, and I do entire teachings on this, the Lord God came, Adam and Eve, they had eaten of the fruit. God said, you're not supposed to eat of that fruit. So they did anyways. God comes to him and says, where are you, Adam? God is pursuing Adam in relationship, even though Adam screwed up, disobeyed, and literally the whole world was changed by that decision. Adam, in fear, says, I heard your voice in the garden, and I was afraid because I was naked and hid myself. And so God asked this question. He said, who told you that you were naked? So there's a couple things I want you to understand here just from this passage. The first thing I want you to understand is Adam had fear come over him. Now imagine not living in fear at all, and then fear coming upon you. That would have to be a very traumatic transition, because before this act of disobedience, there was no fear, because fear is not of God. Fear is of the enemy. So he feels this fear coming over him, and what does he do? He makes himself one with fear. He says, I was afraid, or let's make it a modern, a now statement. I am afraid, or I am fear. One of the biggest mistakes you make is you think when you're feeling fear that fear is just you. That's just the way that you're made. And it's not true. God did not in his blueprint design you to be a fearful person. You may battle fear. That doesn't mean you are fear. And so God confronts the thought that came to Adam, and he says, who told you that? And that's what I'm here to do today, is to ask you the question, who? Who told you to be afraid? Who told you to live in fear? Who told you you're not good enough? Who told you you're going to be stuck? Who told you you're a victim? Who told you you're always going to be battling this fear? And so that's what I want to address with tenacity, is really helping you to understand God wants you free. Now, in the Bible, God addressed fear with everyone he used practically. There's Moses, who he had a stuttering problem. That's where his fear went. He says, God, I got a stuttering problem. And when I go to talk to the people. So God says, I'm with you, Moses. Go face it. He steps up to the people of Egypt, and you don't see stuttering Moses. You see boldness there. Jeremiah, God says, do not be afraid of their faces, because I'm with you. Because Jeremiah had a fear of man. He had a fear of rejection. And he couldn't look at people in the eye. But God called him to be a prophet. As a young man, called him to be a prophet. The disciples were panicking in the boat. And Jesus taught them, why are you so afraid? You do not have to be afraid. Be of good cheer. You can have peace. And to Timothy, who was a young guy in ministry that Paul was mentoring, Paul said, God has not given you the spirit of fear. So what about you? What's your deal? What's the stuff that you've got to overcome and face so that on the other side of fear, you see what God has in store for you? Now, in my teaching and in my training, I help people to overcome fear on 3 levels, because it affects you on 3 levels. There's the spirit dimension of fear, because there's an invisible battle going on, a spiritual battle. And that battle is coming at you to dilute your faith, to keep your gift dormant, to keep you from seeing who you are and your potential, dilute your ability to hear God's voice, because there is an invisible arena and your spirit's engaged in it. You ever just feel like out of nowhere, you just kind of start feeling anxious? Or just out of nowhere, some of that deep stuff, what psychologists call like the subconscious, I really believe it's the dimension of your spirit, man. Because there's a battle going on over you, and you need to understand and learn how to take thoughts captive at a deeper level. But it also affects you at a soul level. Why? Because the soul dimension is the embedded part of your thinking. And fear wants to program you and train you to remain in fear-based living, thinking, acting, responding. It wants to program you. And I am here to help you break the programming so that your spirit can be empowered, your soul can be renewed, your mind renewed, and then your body receives the effects of fear because you have a drain of energy, lethargy, there's stress, and then there's chronic issues that begin to develop in our body. I would say that the majority of the illnesses and issues that we face in our physiology, from syndromes to certain disease patterns, fear is a major part of those things manifesting. And yes, I know there's nutrition. I believe in solid nutrition. In fact, I teach and coach people in nutrition. I believe in that. It's changed my life. I also believe in prayer. I also believe in but there is a dimension of living a life that is not fear-based that will change your health forever. Now, I want to tell you 6 things because I want to power pack this webinar with solid information, insights that you can begin to take and understand. And I want to give you 6 things that fear does not want you to know. And it's found in the Bible in 2 Timothy 1, 6, and 7. Even if you're not a Christian or you don't believe in the Bible or God, you can still get a lot out of this. I'm telling you. There's powerful stuff here. Paul is an apostle in the faith. And he has Timothy, a guy who is one of his mentees. He's a mentor and a spiritual father. And so he says to him, therefore, I remind you, I want you to remember something, Timothy, to stir up the gift of God which is in you through the laying on of my hands. For God has not given us the spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of a sound mind. What Paul was doing is he said, I want to remind you of your purpose and calling. I want to remind you of when I prayed for you, when I was with you, I want to take you back to that moment so you remember it, because we all have this ability to just forget things. He says, I want to take you back to that place, and I want to lead you into something of an understanding that there were gifts stirred up in you, a gift of God inside of you. What is that gift? Well, there's spiritual gifts. There is the gift of who you are. It's your identity. There's the gift of your calling. There's the gift of what God's sending you into. I want to stir that up in you, and I want you to remember this, because in this passage, folks, there's 6 things here that your enemy, that fear, does not want you to know. Because number 1, fear is doing something that you need to be aware of. It's keeping your gifts from shining. It's keeping you from starting the business. It's keeping you from making the phone calls. It's keeping you from giving the teaching. It's keeping you from stepping out and helping other people. It's keeping you from praying for others. It's keeping you from taking that step. Most of you are literally a fear-facing step away from shining, and you've let fear destroy your life. You've let fear hold you back, and you know it. You're listening to this, and it's fear. Stop justifying it. Stop blaming it on other people. Stop saying it was because I didn't have enough money, because I didn't have enough support. You were afraid, and it's all right, because Adam was too. Adam was too. And when you begin to believe, you know what, enough is enough. I'm going to step out, and I'm going to see what's out there. Because, folks, nothing happens unless we take risks. Nothing happens unless we step out in faith. I am living today because I faced my fears, and I said, I don't want to live a mundane life. I want to go, and I want to go for all that God has for me. And I saw hundreds of people around me. They were scared just watching me because I made a decision. You know what? God responds to faith. And I can't live in the full potential of my faith listening to fear, making me so apprehensive, so incapable of stepping out. The second thing I want you to understand is I want you to understand tormenting fear does not come from God. This was huge for my life. That's why Paul says God has not given you the spirit of fear. It's not from God. So when you feel that tormenting fear, now there were times in my life and in my journey where I was like, man, this feeling is so strong, this must be God. God's teaching me something, or he's leading me in something, so I listened to it. Then the next time I make a decision, that fear would come on me, it would come on my thoughts, And I listened to it again. Next thing you know, I had such a stronghold in my life built. Every decision was based on fear, and fear began to own me. And I'm telling you, as a guy who grew up in church, loved God, I was riddled with a spirit of fear in my life. And I had to realize it's not from God. God's not trying to teach me something. He doesn't use tormenting fear to try to teach us stuff. And so what you need to understand is, number 3, fear is a spiritual force. That's why Paul said here, God's not giving you the spirit of fear. What does that mean when he says that? I want you to understand something very easy to understand. Let's not make this complicated. When it comes to spiritual warfare, what does an evil spirit do? It just gives you a thought. And what's the thought based on? Based on what it does in its nature. A spirit of fear talks the language of fear. It attacks you with fear thoughts. It makes you anxious. Any thought creates a biological effect in your life. There is not a thought in your life that doesn't have an emotion attached to it. All thoughts have feelings. And so fear knows this. So if fear can pulsate a fearful thought in your life, it will connect to emotion. It'll kick up imagination, projection, all these scenarios, and it will cause you to live a very passive, kind of introspective, super hyper cautious life, over cautious life, where you never step out into the fullness and the potential that you have. You need to understand that we are at war. We are absolutely at war. You are at war, and the battle is over your thoughts. The battle is over how you're going to think. The battle is what thought system will you give attention to? Will it be fear, or will it be faith, hope, and love? The decision is ours. And it all comes out of what are we going to begin focusing on, learning, growing in, so that God can set us free from our fears instead of us serving them. Number 4, this is key because this is a game changer. Fear needs to be confronted. We need to face our fears. We need to rise up in boldness. Because really the opposite of living in fear is living confident and bold and in peace, right? You see this picture of just strength and peace and confidence. And there's those times you got to stand up to it. And I'll talk about that some more. But we have to understand something. Fear gets displaced by love. And this is a concept I love to teach on, because what you need in your life for your fear issues is you need love. Because I want you to think about something. Fear and love can't work at the same time in their fullest capacities. Now, you may feel a mixture, and that's usually, when we're battling it, we're trying to let love win, but fear's really rising up strong. But usually one is going to be the predominant voice. And that's something we have to begin to decide. Because love is different, though. Love is an experience. Love is a heart connection. And what I had to go through in my life and journey was I needed my heart healed, because there were areas of understanding God's love, especially as my Father, because that's who He is. God is a Father, and God is love. And so I needed to get to a place where I started to allow God to heal my heart so that I could connect to love. The more you can connect to love, the more you displace fear. But I wasn't trained in that. I didn't grow up with a grid of hearing the words, "I love you, Mark." Connection, affection. I didn't always have those things. And we live in a world that struggles with that. And I know for a fact, many of you listening to this, you struggle with what love means. Feeling loved and feeling safe. And your enemy doesn't want you to know this, because he knows if you can connect to love, it's going to displace fear. Now, fear has no room when our minds are grounded in sound thinking. It says here, God's not giving you the spirit of fear, but it's giving you power, love, and a sound mind. I'm going to help you to understand how to begin to renew your mind so that your brain and your mind are focused on the right pathways and the right thoughts to set you up for powerful thinking, not powerless thinking. And lastly, fear keeps you from the bold lion that you are. Everybody watching go, "Rawr." Because in every one of you listening to this, you are a lion. There's a lion inside of you. But fear will keep it capped. It will keep it tapped out, away, won't allow you to connect to it. And that's something that I've learned in my life and journey. 15 years ago, you wouldn't have seen DeJesus rising up in the way that I do now. Why? Because I was riddled with fear. And I learned how to put it in the background. But what does the Bible say? God's not giving you the spirit of fear, but of power. That's what's waiting on the other side, folks, is power. Now, I want to give you some tips to overcoming real quick, and then I want to give you an invitation to take this a step further. I want you to join with me. I am calling for a group of people that for the next month, I'm going to pour into and mentor and help you to go to the next level in overcoming fear. Okay? In order to do this, though, you're going to need process. You're going to need time. A lot of people, they want just a quick prayer. They want just can I sit down and can you walk me through some exercise and then I'm good? No, you need a process. You need time to walk the stuff out to make the change. It took me a few years to make the full revolution into the person that I am today. And I'm so excited because I'm still growing and still facing things and still overcoming. You're also, number two, these are critical. You're going to need practice. You're going to need opportunities to develop new patterns because you can get free spiritually. You can get free in the soul and renew your mind, but your body needs to catch up. And it often takes time for your body to catch up to what's new inside of you. And some of you don't give yourself the time to let that cycle take place, so you get discouraged, you regress, you go back, and then you feel like you can never get free. I want to help you through that. Now, you're also going to need a renewed grid for living without fear as a driving force in your life. So you're going to need training. And because a lot of you listening to this, you have stinking thinking. We all do. We have some real stinking thinking, and we need a grid. What do I mean by a grid? A way of thinking. A grid like a blueprint, because you all have a blueprint. It's the basic narrative of how you wake up and face your day. It's the guide. It's what you utilize. And for many of you, you need a renovation in that. Now, what you're going to need as well is you're going to need to remember the treasure that is on the other side of your fears. I want you to think about the peace you're going to connect to. I want you to think about faith being activated. I want you to think about you pursuing your dreams. I want you to think about you living as a bold, confident human being, a bold and confident child of God. So I want you in your notes to write this down. What would your life be like without fear as a driving force? I'm not saying that you're just going to live without any emotion and you'll never have a fearful feeling or thought in your life. No, I'm talking about as a driving force. What would it be like? Take a moment, write it down. And then this last thing, and I want to propose something to you. You need to develop a strong why to overcoming your fear issues. Why do you want to overcome fear? Because if you don't have a why, then your goal is just to get rid of these yucky feelings. What if you're leaving fear and you want to break through and overcome fear? What are you moving towards? That's a question you need to start answering now. So it may mean I'm going to stop fearing what people think so I can make confident and bold decisions. I want to stop being anxious so I can have peace in my day and finally enjoy my life. I want to be able to face my fears so I can experience intimacy with my spouse. I want to face my fears so I can have real friendships. I want to face my fears so I can start the business, so I can go to the next level in my sales group. You need to establish the why.